Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chelsea, and I'm a volunteer with Indigenous Physical Activity and Cultural Circle. Before we begin, just a gentle reminder that all sessions will be recorded. We ask that you please keep your videos and microphones off during this session. If you have any questions, please raise your hand using the raise hand button in Zoom. Today, I will be introducing Ethan Schmidt and Dr. Miles. Dr. Rosalin Miles is a member of Lytton First Nation. She has completed her doctoral degree in education, major of exercise science, and has a graduate certificate in nonprofit management from the University of Central Florida. She completed her Master of Science degree in Human Kinetics, specializing in coaching science at UBC. Dr. Miles has a combined 35 years of experience in sports, fitness, education, and health fields as a coach, registered kinesiologist, research writer, and athlete. She has trained and developed Olympic and national levels athletes and has motivated the general population to achieve personal goals. She currently works with the University of British Columbia within the Indigenous Studies in Kinesiology department. Ethan Schmidt is a current Master of Science student under the supervision of Dr. Darren Warburton within the Physical Activity Promotion and Chronic Disease Prevention Unit. Ethan's research focuses on youth athlete development and well-being. He possesses a B Science with honors in exercise science from Seattle University. From Pottsville, Washington, Ethan comes from white settler ancestry and respectfully resides in Vancouver, BC, on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. Today, Ethan Schmidt and Dr. Miles will be speaking on reviewing the IPACC long-term athlete and participant development model, discussing the transition out of competitive activity into being active for life. This presentation and sharing circle will consist of a short summary and documentary on the 2014 IPACC long-term athlete and participant development model. This model is designed to provide a culturally adaptive form of the Canadian long-term development model, usable for Indigenous people in sport, recreation, fitness, and traditional activities. Of specific interest in this review is the transition out of competition or sport. This transition can introduce changes in one's wellness, providing opportunities for growth and connection to one's community. Dr. Miles and Ethan Schmidt invite attendees to join for an open dialogue to share stories in sports, recreation, and traditional activities, opening discussion around the transition from competition to new strategies of activity and maintenance of wellness. Please join me in welcoming Ethan Schmidt and Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Chelsea, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming to our presentation and discussion. As mentioned, we'll be beginning with a short overview of stages in athlete and participant development, talking about areas of focus and certain considerations for Indigenous athletes and Indigenous-centered programming. Then Dr. Miles will take us through a discussion and sharing circle to hear some experiences, hopefully from some viewers today. We'll have time kind of set for questions in between the two sections, so feel free to raise that hand at that time or enter questions as we go through. First, I would like to open with a land acknowledgement. I'm currently presenting from near Seattle, Washington, and acknowledge that the land I'm presenting on is within the Aboriginal territory of the Squamish people. Please see this slide for the Squamish tribe's official land acknowledgement. I'm fortunate to learn, play, and live on Indigenous space, and I recognize the privilege to have an open discussion to hear the stories and lived experiences of those gathered here today. And so a long-term athlete and participant development model, the LTAPD, the goals of it are to create consistent recommendations and provide best development practices for young physical activity participants. To do so, we identify stages of development separated by age, physical growth, and maturity. The participant moves through these stages according to their ability and interest in competition. This includes both participation in traditional activities and games, for example, participating in dance or Arctic winter games or hunting or fishing, as well as other sports streams such as hockey, athletics, lacrosse, and other sports. An acknowledgement of the unique cultural differences and particular strengths of Indigenous participants as well as some potential barriers to participation, a development plan must reflect these Indigenous ways of living, tradition, and knowledge. And so in doing so, from these objectives, there have been multiple iterations of Indigenous-led creations of LTAPD. The IPACC Indigenous Physical Activity and Cultural Circle first published a culturally adapted form in 2014, taking adaptations from the Canadian LTAD and True Sports LTAD matrix. It is the hope that these plans can be then adapted and help support each unique community's needs and traditions. More recently, Sport for Life and the Canadian Aboriginal Sports Circle recently published an Indigenous long-term development plan in 2019. You can see their model in a graphic to the right, in which participants progress through stages from active start to active life, and there's simultaneous movement and crossover between Indigenous teams and activities and in Canadian-based national pathways. However, despite these introductions in 2019 and 2014, only a few national and regional sporting organizations have publicly available sport-specific and Indigenous-specific pathways. There's been a couple pilot programs in BC Snowboard, Canoe Kayak Canada, BC Basketball, and Canada Badminton, but a lot of sports still have no publicly available plan. So we need to kind of spread this awareness and give these ideas out to programs. And so not listed in this previous graphic, and something we want to acknowledge and make sure is also included, are additional stages for participants with disabilities or have particular accessibility needs. This awareness stage first occurs at any possible age, occurring anytime accessibility needs may change or need to be considered. These include both physical and psychological considerations, including accounting for trauma, physical needs such as wheelchair, sport, and other reasons. From there, we go into a first contact stage and really want to ensure that positive introduction to sport and physical activity. With this, we need proper knowledgeable coaches and mentors who know how to teach towards those with accessibility barriers, as well as providing appropriate equipment and support. This also might include travel, for example, where you might not have access in certain areas and might need to go to reach certain facilities or equipment and coaches. And so providing that travel support is another important aspect that will continue throughout stages. Physical activity beginning with active start from 0 to 6 years old, we know is greatly helpful in early childhood. It allows children to maintain health, improve development of social and mental skills, and acquire coordination and movement skills. This active start is a period of exploration and introduction to movements and skills, such as running, jumping, catching, throwing. Traditional activities and games are a standard and historic form of introducing aspects of physical literacy and can be incorporated into physical education and education around the home and community at an early age. They help introduce positive self-esteem, connection, and emotional development. We want to minimize sedentary time and really promote that healthy behavior, holding sedentary time to less than an hour if we can, break up in sitting and rest through movement breaks or activities. Involving parents and elders is a repeatedly reliable connection to these healthier and more active children, and they provide encouragement, role modeling, and transportation financial support. We want to focus on fun and play and really minimize that competition focus. From there, we move into a stage known as the fundamental stage from 6 to 9 years old. In this, we're exploring a wide variety of sports and activities, introducing a little more structure, a little more technical involvement. Participants really shouldn't specialize in one sport for the whole year and have ample opportunities for rest and fun and recovery to avoid burnout. This age is when it's great to begin building concepts of teamwork, sportspersonship, and establish positive behaviors. Traditional activities and sports continue to be great forms of developing cultural pride, confidence, awareness, and introduce history of Indigenous sports and activities. Factors to account for include planning for transportation access to structured activities and the demand on parents. For example, if a student normally takes a bus after school, they might not be able to participate in after-school activity because then they no longer have reliable transportation, and the parent might not be able to take them to the activity, or they might not have safe transportation to get home. So considering those aspects there, we move into 8 to 12 years old. This stage just before puberty or just before peak growth. in ages 8 to 11 for girls, up to 12 for boys, is the prime period for skill acquisition and mental and physical development. This period is a time to identify each participant's unique talents and favorite activities. As well, we might start to consider seasonal differences and how that might influence training and separating periodization during sport. For example, separating winter hockey while still including summer sports such as hunting and fishing. We want to introduce planning and recovery, teaching kids to learn about injuries, fueling their body in healthy ways, and recovering between activities. And then key considerations we want to account for is we want to start developing those gender-specific spaces and continue support for girls' participation in sport, as this age is when girls' participation starts to decrease for a number of factors. At this age, connection through elders in the land with traditional activities and games can provide sharing of knowledge and promote that connection culturally and spiritually. During this age group, team cohesion and cultural safety are extremely important values to instill, as this age can be suspect to start to begin that inclusion or forms of bullying that we might see. And so having that safe space and inclusive space is really important in this early age. Finally, then moved to the training and train stage in the kind of early teens, ages 12 to 16. We start to narrow down to 1 or 2 favorite activities, can be either simultaneous or take place in different seasons. This age group is during and after the peak growth period for children and young adults, meaning it's a prime time for physical strength, power, and endurance. You might start to introduce more strength training exercises versus purely body weight exercises, for example. Time for competition begins to increase. These tournaments or games provide a valuable chance for community connection and support. Youth shared in that Brunner et al. Article detail how tournaments and gatherings really bring towns together, and they detailed how traveling to those other cities and other regions provided that sense of community representation and pride for those youth to take forward into their lives. During this age, it's important to introduce body and cultural pride as well, due to the physical changes one undergoes during these ages. Having that pride and positive view towards one body reinforces wellness despite possible exclusion or conflict. As traveling begins to increase and you might introduce other leagues or other regions, we want to ensure there's still that culturally safe and inclusive, particularly in non-traditional activities where, for example, someone might be the only Indigenous athlete on a particular team. We want to make sure coaches and leagues are safe for that athlete to participate and they have ways of being comfortable in that area. Finally, we get to the training to win and compete. This is the most focused period of competition. Athletes will have intense periods of travel, regular competition, and maybe aiming to compete in Olympics, NAIG, Arctic Winter Games, and other competitions or collegiate settings. Goals of this stage are to provide opportunities for this participant to excel, maximizing their ability to showcase their talents and strengths. We are hoping to support their holistic wellness, providing psychological, spiritual, and emotional support as they are competing in their physical realm. We want to also make sure we have safe sport opportunities, providing clear reporting and academy structures if they're in an unsafe situation. We want to continue that support and connection to community, as that will help kind of prepare them for possible stress and promote that wellness. They continue to represent and showcase their community traditions. And this is especially important for participants who may be leaving their community for the first time, as for example, those going to college or traveling overseas, moving and living with host families. They become a little more separated from their community, and maintaining that connection is a way to keep that wellness. Because that competition and physical activity can be an essential part of one's formation of identity and contributes to their wellness, life events or transitions can affect that. Participants might be in new locations, or they might not have been able to have regular contact with their home for years. They might be under significant pressure to perform. These life events and transitions are natural as they might shift away from physical performance. This can be a period of significant stress, especially those who are not prepared or in sudden transitions. For example, they might have an injury or deselection from a team. They might age out and no longer be able to participate in their sport or activity. Within this transition, we want to make sure participants maintain their positive relation to movement. We want to keep their ability to move. We want participants to be active still, enjoy their sport. Participants may feel lost due to no longer having structured or set schedules and workouts. We hope to reinvest that time and energy, building that community, introducing new careers, and exploring new activities. For those interested in maintaining that connection to sport, we can offer coaching training or mentorship chances, and it's a valuable way of giving back to one's community while still keeping active. And from that transition phase in stages where participants exit competition, the goal is to maintain activity for life, maintain healthy patterns, continue to be active, and maintain social connections and mental well-being. It's important to maintain programming for youth who are no longer interested in organized activities. And that's typically around grade 9. We see that in drop in enrollment and drop in recreational opportunities. We want to account for those who might be no longer able to participate in these or no longer have that school structure. We also want to ensure programming is available for genders and continues to be inclusive, as that can be a barrier, again, when girls leave sport or structured activities, and they might not be included or have the same opportunities for other activities. For older participants, involvement in these physical activities or traditional activities, sport can be a way to pass on their knowledge and reaffirm their identity that they might not have been able to participate in previously, for example, in traditional games. One of the things that came up was in residential schools, if they were not able to participate in their traditional games, they can come and join the youth and teach those skills that they may not have been able to when they were younger. And so to summarize, a LTAPD model is a useful tool to provide guidance for stages of development in sport and physical activity, provides considerations to have appropriate activities to best prepare them for the future, and provide opportunities for wellness in all aspects of life. Involving traditional activities and involving the community provides numerous benefits to one's physical, emotional, and spiritual health. It allows relationships to build with community, land, and knowledge keepers. Movement between these Indigenous and Canadian sports streams should be fluid and can be nonlinear, with participants moving up and down stages across different activities. So a person might come from a basketball team and then move into a traditional activity or vice versa as they age or change their interests. By identifying what stage a participant is in, programs can be designed to provide appropriate level and types of activities. Programs will need to be culturally safe and focus on inclusion, positivity, and building relationships for all participants. On the right, you can see an infographic that we've begun creating with summaries and the key considerations for each stage. This concludes this part of the presentation. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we can receive them before we move on to our discussion stage. Thank you.
Great job, Ethan. Are there any questions from the room?
I don't think there's a question. I think just kind of an update. The junior all-native has actually become competitive from the 14 and under category. So we've got players that are showing up at the junior all-native as young as 7. So there might be a shift coming, so to speak. Some of the best athletes that I know started at a really young age, went on to university ball and a couple of other really unique situations, but majority of them started that young. Like I remember seeing my niece playing basketball when she was 3 or 4 years old. She was trying to put the ball in the net, and she just kind of grew up pure baller. So I just think this next generation doesn't have the residential school vices, and I think they'll be prepared and ready to start their children way faster than we did.
Thank you for that, Vi. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, so when we think about competitive, we think about local, but the all native isn't local, it's more regional, right? So I think it's something to really reflect on now that we're kind of breaking free from oppression of residential school. Maybe people are starting competitive sport at a younger age. Would you say that's correct?
I think so. And to be honest with you, I consistently, you know what I mean, love this conference just for this reason, is because we get the chance to actually have these conversations and share this information, right? And I think that as things shift, more things come into play, but that's a longer discussion point. So I'll go there then when we get there.
Thank you, Vi. Well, I think we're going to go into the discussion now. So I think we're going to, we'd like to open up the forum and have a sharing circle. And we really would like everyone's feedback. And Vi, not to put you in the spot, but I love for you to continue sharing. So one of the things that's really important about this model, the long-term athlete and participant model, the reason why we added the word participant, because when we think about things, for example, like the powwow, we have people competing at a very young age. We have people in a high-level competition, you know, regionally, provincially, nationally, and on Turtle Island. People compete down to United States, etc. So we really want to acknowledge that people who are in traditional sports, for example, are also athletes. So that was kind of one of the conversations we really wanted to share. And Shannon's got something in the chat here. A chat it says Tiny Tots is the best category in powwow. Oh my gosh, I love our little people in powwow. It just warms my heart, but they are serious, you know, and they're training as soon as they can stand. You know, they're getting given regalia. They're listening to the community songs in the womb. So it's really important. Like Ava will recognize a community song from Didadat from the womb. Like she would have listened to that for 9 years. And so I'm 9 years, sorry, 9 months. So I think it's amazing. Can we go to the next slide, Ethan?
Yep.
So as we talked about transitioning out of sport, we really want to think about this stage. We'd like to hear your perspective, our Indigenous people's perspective. And our first question, and I'm just going to open up the floor. And Vi, I hope you can open this up, or anybody else if you're feeling shy. What ways has physical activity impacted your holistic well-being? Is one of the questions. The next one is, following the transition out of competition or sport, how did this affect your well-being? And how were you supported as you managed this transition? So I'd like to invite people to share. And I also want to state the survey is also available online. We will have a gift card of $50 for anybody who fills out the online survey, and we'll do the draw on Monday. And then Sean Hanna will be sharing this this Qualtrics link by email as well. And this research is being done on behalf of IPACC, Indigenous Physical Activity and Cultural Circle. Thank you, Cooksham. And I'd like to open the floor or the circle.
All of us are coming off of COVID. So if anything, I hate to admit this, but my wellness has kind of dropped because of COVID. And you know what I mean? Being in school, being in front of the computer a whole lot for the last couple of years. I hate to say it, I've not done as much for self-care and my whole, besides the berry picking and the other things that were keeping us sane during COVID, right? Because we kept our circle really super, super small. But physical activity, for a lot of us, like we couldn't coach, we couldn't, you know what I mean? Like we went to the Junior All Native and it looked like there were some teams that lived in the gym during the entirety of COVID, right? Because it didn't look like they skipped a beat, right? In some of their programs, and other programs, we were seeing the transition of them coming out of COVID and starting to prepare for competitive ball again. So there was quite the mixture between teams. Following the transition out of competition or sports, how did it affect your well-being? Myself personally, I think all of us were missing each other and missing absolutely anything and everything in and around it. How were you supported as you manage this transition? it helped that I was going to school and I was using my brain for something. I've always explained to people while I'm going to school, it feels like there's a whole team of people moving furniture inside my head. And every time I learn something new, they rearrange it and the house keeps getting bigger and bigger inside my head. So that's kind of how it feels. It feels like you're in a ceremony and you're allowing the ancestors to stretch your mind the whole time you're in school. Like I've always really honestly believed that research does that for you. But I will let somebody else take the floor. I probably have more thoughts on this right now. But I just say we need to keep in mind that generation coming up, they're gonna be less, they have less barriers, or they see less barriers, and all they see is do. So I think things are about to shift. That's my main point, I guess.
Thank you, Vi. I always heard it's going to take 7 generations after residential school for us to be in that, really come back to our culture and traditions. And so I think we're 1 or 2 generations, maybe even 3 now. So it's very exciting times. So thanks for sharing.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Vi said about the COVID. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I guess at the height of COVID, she was 14, involved in volleyball, involved in a lot of things, and then all of a sudden that was all taken away. So for the last couple of years, she had nothing and entered high school and tried out for volleyball, and obviously for high school, for the first time they had tryouts, so she didn't quite make the team, but she's basically kind of backed out of sports and some physical activity for a while. And I think there's going to be that gap for a while where we have to get that that age group back into it, because it's, especially for girls, it's that tricky time to, you know, get them confident enough to stay in their sport. So I definitely think we need to reach out to that gap year there of girls. Just to kind of comment on the physical activity and keeping up with it, and coming out of, you know, aging up as B. I think a key point is finding something you love and a community that supports you in it. If you're not surrounded by people that like the same thing as you and keep you going, then it's hard to stick to something. So again, COVID, right? I know that I was able to stay physically active just because of community, and that meant Zoom, that meant whatever, but that's what kept us busy during that time. So finding people that surround you and support you in what you're doing, I think, is the key.
I think you bring up a really important point, Valerie, that you and Vi brought up, is that transition of competition for some people was very immediate because of COVID, right? I think it's something to really consider when we're looking at this dialogue.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some kids that didn't even get the introductory to sport at that time, right? So they're kind of lagging behind. And I was a little frustrated, like I'm from the city. I was a little frustrated that my daughter's high school experience when she's starting, and the fact that they were talking so much about kids and mental health and stuff, that they decided that year they were still going to have just tryouts. Why not just develop a bunch of teams where kids can play for that year and get back into it?
Yeah, you know, I think those are really important points. So I'm thinking from the detraining part, like thinking about what people have gone through, like when you do disengage from sports, whether it was because of aging out or because of COVID, what do you think the impacts were for holistic health and wellness for yourself?
For myself, well, for myself, I have to say, I'm really involved in fact, my husband and I for 8 years owned a CrossFit gym, and a CrossFit gym and the community around it, it's more about the community. So I was grateful for the fact that I could still be in touch with all the people in that environment. We connected with Zoom. We just kind of like just kept people going, and we pulled each other through it. And if people weren't taking part, we were just checking in and just, you know, no huge expectations, but just making sure that everybody was either moving in some way.
I'd like to add a thought to Valerie's experience for high school. It took me a couple of years to convince my daughter to try out for high school teams. And unfortunately, I made the mistake of choosing the wrong school. I assumed that it was going to be the right school because it was connected supposedly to athletics and academics, because that was a requirement my kid had to live by. She had to have a B average in order to be allowed to play by me. Um, and what we ended up experiencing was favoritism, right? The young ladies that were conducting the tryouts for the grade 8 basketball team chose all of the blonde hair, blue eyed girls that they knew from soccer the summer before, um, versus actually checking out their actual skills and plays. And my daughter was cut from the basketball tryouts because her and her cousin had a 30-second giggle with each other. And we were told that they weren't taking the tryouts seriously. So we have to acknowledge that, unfortunately, that's a part of our kids' experience. I don't want to like dwell on it. I just want to speak to it, that there's also those things that are happening. So we also need to better prepare our kids, I guess, because I ended up going back to those same coaches and asking, what am I not teaching them? And that's what they explained to me, is that they didn't think that they were taking it seriously. And it turned out it was kind of ironic because she actually ended up trying out for the grade 9 silver team, which is considered our B team, and she made it because they were actually judging her based on her skills versus the cultural or non-cultural content of the coach.
Thank you for sharing. So what I'm hearing, like sometimes when people stop being competitive, it's really not something they chose to do, that sometimes they're actually pushed out, which is really unfortunate. And I'm glad to hear she had another opportunity. I wonder if Thomas Moore, if you could share what ways has physical activity impacted your holistic well-being? Not to put you on the spot, Thomas.
I guess our community hosts a number of adult tournaments and gatherings. It's kind of been the method that we use to, I guess, keep people engaged in physical activity. And it's kind of the same throughout the region as well. I'm just trying to figure out the second part of the question.
Following the transition out of competition and sport, how did it affect your well-being? So like, I know when I quit sports, I went through a lot. Feeling like a has-been, wannabe. Right?
Yeah. I guess it's just like trying to find like a space to recreate the camaraderie. That's kind of the biggest thing I missed, was like the I guess the relationships, you know, the chats in the locker room and that. Yeah.
Yeah, so the relationships. And how were you supported as you managed this transition? Like, do you feel like you had support when you left sports as an athlete, or what happened? Who was there for you?
I guess the community, you know, recreation department was, and that's kind of what got me kind of involved in the department itself too. Yeah.
So you transitioned from an athlete to working in the recreation department?
Yeah, well, first kind of like volunteer coaching, and then working kind of part-time, and then going to school, and then for the sole purpose of wanting to work in the field.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that your community had jobs there for you, right? It's really important.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about how sports or physical activity help with your holistic health and wellness, meaning emotionally, spiritually, mentally, or physically?
Just kind of just having that outlet, I guess, is important, you know, as you age too. I guess you kind of there's a gap in your life after the competition kind of phase ends. Yeah.
Well, it's great that you're giving back.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Thomas.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm gonna pass the talking stick to Curtis. Would you mind sharing, Curtis? The question we're working on is, what ways has physical activity impacted your holistic well-being? And if you're shy, if someone wants to just go to the survey, it's in the chat now. I know it takes sometimes to unmute yourself.
There's a couple of things that, like, for example, with powwow, once you're a powwower, you're always a powwower, whether if you take a break from it for a couple of years, you can go back. I just, because I realize that, you know what I mean? I'm preparing now to get into the different age categories, and I'm gathering all of the resources in order to turn around and go back. I danced out as a champion, so I have to dance back in dressed as a champion, right? That kind of thing. So it's kind of an unspoken thing that's kind of required of you. So I don't think I've ever seen myself as a retired athlete, I guess, so to speak, because powwow is one of those things that you can do your entire life. You can go into the golden age with, if you choose to, right? Like if I decided to take another 20-year break, I could walk into the golden age and start winning championships there. So,
yeah, that's very true. That's a really good point, Vi, because I know, like, even for master athletes, you know, or even people who are returning to the culture, they can take up powwow and go into competition if they want. So
yeah.
maybe there should be cyclical parts in each stage, you know? So I think that's a very good point. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else want to share? I'm going to pick on Shannon now. Shannon Field.
I'm just trying to reflect on, can you hear me okay? Okay. I think physical activity, I know that it brings up like my energy levels. It also, I think there's like also like that level of confidence, like when you can actually, when you're like very, like you have more physical capacity, and like just knowing that, you know, if you need to move the couch by yourself, you can. Like any of those little daily tasks, you just never know when you know, you gotta run fast to catch the bus or something. It's just like nice to have that capacity. I also really enjoy just the community aspect of it all. That, you know, there's something so special about working with a team and working towards a common goal and developing skills together, and those bonds that you create are just something that's really special.
Thank you, Shannon. And have you competed in sports or traditional activities, or know somebody who has?
I played soccer at the like bottom level competition. Like there was no tryouts or anything, but you still went to like tournaments and all of that. And our team was actually filled with
people who were pretty high level competition, but they just didn't feel like trying out for anything and they just wanted to play for fun. And so it was actually a really great team to be on because I learned so much from them. And it was my first year playing soccer, and like my skills developed so quickly because I was around so many amazing role models. But otherwise, I've kept it pretty recreational for everything.
Great, and just one final question around holistic health and wellness. When you're, are you still playing soccer?
No, I haven't played in quite a few years. Yeah.
And so when you were playing soccer, how do you think your holistic health and wellness was impacted by being physically active during that time?
Again, I think just like physical fitness was better off. That community aspect, like I developed so many friendships playing on, you know, a whole bunch of different teams. And I think there's also the aspect of like, if you're gonna be competing in sport, you also want to eat better. You want to have like proper meals before you go, you know, you're not grabbing McDonald's for breakfast. You want something that's actually going to digest well and then fuel you afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon, for sharing. Maddie Chow, could you mind sharing?
Yes. Physical activity has always been a huge part of my life. I was always in competitive sports since I was young. I was a competitive swimmer and a competitive dancer, and I had a lot of energy, so my parents always put me in like a lot of different sports to try to tire me out. So the reason I got out of competition was I actually got injured, and so that led to a pretty abrupt ending for a lot of my sports. So that was a hard transition for me because a lot of my closest friends were in my sport. And so a part of me felt like I was losing them, even though they were still going to be my friends. Like I felt like I was losing a part of myself. So that was like a very hard transition. But in relation to like holistic health and wellness, I feel like physical activity, for me at least, really actually touches on all components of my holistic health and wellness. It touches on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects. When I was just finishing up my career in sports, I did get to attend the North American Indigenous Games. And that was one of the, one of my favorite sporting events where I actually did feel the most connected to my culture, but also I was able to participate in the sport that I'd been training pretty much my whole life to do. And I was able to go into a community where I was able to be fully myself and really enjoy the experience. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Maddie, so much for sharing. That's awesome. What sport were you in?
I was in swimming, and that's where I went to NEG for swimming as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So I'd like to open the floor again. Catherine Anderson, would you like to share?
I can. I'm just going to keep my camera off because I'm a little under the weather and my voice is a little bit rough. But when I was in high school, I was a really competitive archer and I competed in the Alberta Winter Games, and I was kind of thinking that I might go to the national level and keep pursuing that. But there came a time where I had to choose if I was going to be a really competitive archer, if I was going to go to university. And I chose to go to university and to sort of give up my sport. And that was really difficult for me. But I chose that particular sport because it aligns with my heritage. I'm a Michif woman, and we have a huge tradition of archery, especially within the women in our communities. And it was just a really excellent opportunity for me to be out on the land and to enjoy this really traditional activity. It was extremely fulfilling, and I really hope that I can get back into it. So if anyone has any connections to any teams in BC, there's not a huge archery community in Vancouver, but please let me know, and I'd love to come out and shoot and hang out.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing. I would love to learn. So I think it's something that would be a lot of fun to do. I was wondering if I could open up the sharing circle to, yes, just look on. Is that how we say your name? I'm sorry. All right, or if there's anybody else who would like to share, who hasn't shared yet. There we go.
Sorry, I had to step out for like half a second. I kind of missed the question.
Yeah, no worries. So the first question we had was, what ways has physical activity impacted your holistic well-being?
So I guess I never really started like playing I guess any kind of sport until my teen years. Um so I ended up playing lacrosse, and I was a goalie for the team out in London area. I played with them for about 3-4 years, but that has really impacted me for sure. Now I'm trying to get my nieces and nephews into that sport as well, because it's a very like adrenaline based sport. So yeah, definitely that's the only really sport that I played. I know I heard some people went to NAG. I went to NAG as well for archery.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that impacted me in a lot of ways actually, because it got me on a spiritual level, it got me on a mental level. It was going to NAG definitely opened my eyes a lot. Seeing how many different, First Nations or any communities that are out there gathered all in this one big area. That was a year I actually messed up my ankle that year at NAG specifically. So in that way, like it kind of got me down, even though that was like our second day in. And I still had to push through. I still end up placing in my division. But yeah, it was an eye opener for sure, learning archery within the span of like at least 2 to 3 months, and just kind of going at it and then competing in NAG. So yeah, it was a lot to learn within at least 3 months.
Well, it sounds like you had really strong ties to community when you were there. It was a lot of competition. It was really challenging. Would you say besides sorry to hear about your ankle, but besides your ankle, how would you say your well-being was like when you were involved in sports?
um I I don't really know how to answer that, I guess.
It's okay. You don't have to.
My well-being personally for me, it was a lot of I guess trying to be more active. My body wasn't used to all of that, either all of that running or, all of the strength that I had to have in order to pull the bow back, or have the, strength to play lacrosse, because there is a strength that you need. And especially being a goalie, you have to make sure, your body is like well, or like good enough for those short shots or those quick shots that they take on you. So yeah, it definitely like took a toll on me after a while, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds really intense. I've never played lacrosse, and definitely it's a very physical sport. Following the transition out, do you feel that there's any changes in your well-being when you've left archery and lacrosse?
Yeah, I've missed it a lot. I actually went to a lacrosse game yesterday. But yeah, I've definitely missed, being in that environment and having that adrenaline rush while you're out there. And at my age, I can still actually play for the women's team. I just haven't gotten, out there to, I guess, push myself to be more into lacrosse again. But I'm slowly trying to get back into it, slowly trying to, see where my options are. But right now it's just baseball. That's all I'm trying to slowly get back into. But I know lacrosse, a lot of my family is always wanting me to go back into it. But yeah, that was yeah, it took a toll on me, that's for sure, because it was always like, you're active, you're trying to be you're always trying to run, you're always trying to, do like different activities, from like learning from lacrosse going into just, straight nothing. It definitely took a toll on my mental health as well, because it was always like my mind was focused on the game, or my mind was focused on just being in that moment. But ever since then, it's like my mind has not been there anymore.
I can completely relate. I want to like, who was there for you when you kind of started to leave sports? Would you say like just friends or family or community, traditional healers, health professionals? Who would have been there for you? Who was there for you?
Mostly my dad. My dad actually was our coach the last year that I played for intermediates. He was there to always, guide me to where I needed to be, or where the mind space that I needed to have. But me and him both, he used to play baseball as well. But while I was out there playing lacrosse, or while he was coaching, we were always like a team, as well as, lacrosse, like all together. He was the one that was mainly there, that would kind of put me in the right track if something happened, or, if something major happened. Like, there is a lot of fights, I can tell you that for sure, in lacrosse. So if something happened to our team, or if something happened, like off season, he'd always be the one that was there, was like, this is how your mind, or like, not like this is how your mind should be, but I'm going to put you on the right track, kind of thing, put you in the right mind space, kind of thing. So yeah, I would say he was mainly the one that was.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. That's really helpful. I think having family there, and especially mother, father, is just so important. Does that open up the door for anybody else? We have room for one more person to share who hasn't shared yet. Is there anybody else who wants to share the story about physical activity, competitive sports, recreation, and how it impacted your holistic health and wellness? Devery, I sent you a little note. Would you like to share? I know some of you are kind of private and don't want to be put on the spot. I know when I was, I think my first sport was softball. I was a professional athlete and played in Japan. And I really missed playing in Canada. And when I came back to Canada, I was a lot older for sports. And so I basically had to quit my sport unless I went to a recreational team. So it was a real challenge, I think. I think a lot of people can relate to that. When you leave a high level sport, and if you moved away for it, you have to go back to your community. It's very hard to pick it up and to continue it, because usually when you've been gone, there's already been teams formed. And so I just played in recreation teams. So I think that was definitely a challenge, I think, from, and then I had the people who were supporting me, my new teammates, so my kind of like non-competitive sports. I think that's my experience. Does anybody else want to add to that? Feel free to unmic yourself. Show your face. Aurora, maybe you want to share your story. We have 6 minutes left.
I could probably take up the whole time, but do you want to let me?
Oh, Vi, you're so amazing. I think that you need to put on your own workshop next time. And I think everything you've shared has been excellent. But yeah, please, let's wrap it up with Vi.
Well, like you said, you never really retire from powwow. You never really retire from berry picking and all of the harvesting. But I've watched the transition happen in basketball. One day you might be the top athlete. Injury will take you out, and you are out for the next 3 to 4 years. And I'm helping players literally right now. I had a kid that he's played for me, blow out his ACL, and he's gone through 3 operations in the last 2 weeks. So we're working on his mind. We're working on getting him to read books. We're working on him to get him focused on music for a little bit, because he can't really move, and we're Like, basketball happens to be one of the fastest evolving sports I've ever seen. Like I said, one day you might be the top player in the gym. The next day you could be done. And that's how fast it can happen. Right. So I think what I've witnessed is that there's a support group. Everybody messages everybody, somebody posts something. We're always supporting one another. We're always using social media as a way to stay in contact with one another, especially because most of us live across Western Canada. Like I'm in contact with teams all the way into Manitoba, all the way over this way. That's kind of the family that we've developed in and around basketball. So I think most of us with the older divisions, we don't like to see our best players go into the masters divisions, but we know eventually they will be there. Does that make sense? We just don't like pushing them there. There's been a couple of people I've pushed there, but I don't necessarily do it. I try to make it their decision.
No, I think you brought up a really important point, especially with someone who's injured themselves and let's say, for example, they tore their ACL, and really when that happens, you need to play with a knee brace for the rest of your life and you go to masters. And so I think having support for them, like in a different non-competitive team, is really important. But is there other things that they could be involved with in the community that transitioning out of basketball that would be helpful, Vi, do you think?
A lot of them are starting to put on clinics. A lot of them are starting to help the rest of us coaches. They may not be elite players, but they're actually helping us grow the next generation of players. They're offering their experiences and their services to the people that need it. I keep asking Corey and Jean and a couple of the other basketball players to show up and tell their story at this conference. And they keep going, what do you mean?
Please do.
You guys have a story that you guys need to share, and you guys have skills that most people can only dream of, right? And they've got experiences. So I think there's that. And I think the fact that people are now becoming tournament organizers, and they're, you know what I mean? Usually basketball players are educated and they become leaders and they become council people, you know, I mean, like right now, I know of at least 4 or 5 athletes because they were so well known in sports that are now on council, right? And they're hopefully helping create change and helping the transition at that level too. So life goes on, right? And hopefully we'll end up with everybody on council, and then I won't have to do as much. Yay.
Well, let's have the whole team in Cowichan next year to present. And I think, Devery, did you, I know you just sent me a little message. Did you want to have our final word? No pressure.
Oh, thank you. No, sorry. I was just talking, and then anyway, my mic was off and I didn't know it until it was too late. But anyway, yeah, I think that we have to encourage people to participate. And especially, I've been in education for many years, my whole life. And I hear a lot of people say, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough anyway. And they don't do it. They think they're not smart enough or good enough, or someone's better than them, and we have to just encourage them that it's okay. Don't worry about it. Just get out there and do it, and don't think of it that way, but in the way of self-defeating ourselves before we even begin, which I think is the thing we have to work with kids on, is they have a low self-esteem, and they really, you know, it's okay to get out there and not just think that way. But unfortunately, that's kind of how it is with people. That we're not good enough or something. The syndrome, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. We're gonna get pushed to the main session in 1 second, Devery, and I want to end on the words that we are good enough and we deserve to be here. So thank you for sharing those words. So we're gonna go back to the main session now. I think it's gonna be automatic. Dave Gould's gonna swing us back over there, as someone said before, we were scooped up. Thank you, Vi, for being here, Cooksham. And Ethan, any final words before we get scooped?
Yeah, just thank you all for attending and sharing and discussing. With the Qualtrics, if you enter in that, we'll have you have the option to put your contact information. We can do the drawing for the raffle. And if anyone will have the recording, and we have your contact information through the presentation today too. So if you don't get a chance to do the survey, we'll find you and get you a gift card if you want one. So thank you all again for coming and listening and sharing.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Thank you, everyone. See you in the other room.